The Galactic Empire, a vast and seemingly invincible force stretching across the stars, had crushed countless civilizations under its might. The emperors of ancient alien races had once fought for dominance, but now, centuries later, the empire's reach was absolute. It had grown bloated, overconfident, and blind to the true power that lay beyond its borders. Zara, an esteemed general from the Turith race, had served the empire for decades, earning a reputation as one of its fiercest warriors. She had fought in numerous campaigns, from the outer reaches of the Zorth Nebula to the desolate moons of Arjanoth. Zara had seen the destruction of entire worlds, the extinction of species that dared to oppose the empire, and the silent collapse of civilizations too weak to survive. Her heart had hardened over the years, until nothing seemed capable of threatening the empire's dominance. Nothing except for humanity. First, she had dismissed them as little more than a curious species, a primitive race struggling to rise from the ashes of its own violent past. But as the empire's scouts ventured deeper into human space, Zara became aware of a disturbing pattern. The humans were unpredictable, chaotic even. Their history was filled with wars, rebellions, and crises, yet they always seemed to rise again, stronger than before. She spent years studying them, watching from the edges of imperial databases as human intelligence outpaced their technology and their moral convictions outshone their military might. Zara was unnerved by what she saw. Despite their primitive tools and seemingly naive worldview, the humans had an unyielding spirit, a trait the Empire had never encountered in such a raw, concentrated form. Zara, ever pragmatic, knew that the Empire could crush any threat, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this species. A growing sense of foreboding gnawed at her, urging her to act before it was too late. She had seen enough to know that humanity was not a species to be ignored. And so, she did the unthinkable. She requested an audience with the Emperor himself, in the Grand Hall of the Imperial Citadel, with towering statues of long-dead emperors looking down from their marble thrones. Zara stood before the Emperor, her armor gleaming in the cold light. She had served the Empire her entire life, but today, her heart was heavy with the weight of her warning. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. "There is a species on the outer edges of our dominion. They call themselves humans." The Emperor, seated upon his grand throne, did not look up. His imperial gaze swept lazily over her, dismissing the report. "Humans. A trivial species, surely," he muttered. Zara stood tall, her pulse quickening with the knowledge that this might be her final chance to prevent an unseen catastrophe. "I have studied them extensively, my Emperor. Their technology is crude, their forces are weak, but their potential is—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Their potential is unlike any I have seen before. I warn you, they are resilient. If we do not act soon, they will pose a danger unlike any we've faced." The Emperor's lips curled into a dismissive sneer. "I've heard such tales before. Rebellions, uprisings, insurrections. We've crushed them all. Humanity is no different from any of the other primitive species we've extinguished. But they're different," Zara pressed, her voice sharpening. "You do not understand their spirit. They have the capacity to adapt and evolve faster than any race we've encountered. Their ability to overcome obstacles, against all odds, should not be underestimated." The Emperor leaned forward slightly, his expression cold and unamused. "General Zara, you have served us well, but this is no time for such paranoid delusions. You are dismissed." Her warning was brushed aside. Zara felt her heart sink, but she stood her ground. "I implore you to reconsider, Majesty. If we ignore them, it will be our undoing." The Emperor raised a hand, signaling for her to leave. "Enough. Your service to the Empire has been invaluable, but your obsession with these humans clouds your judgment. Do not speak of them again." Zara bowed, her face betraying no emotion, but inside, she felt a fire burning. She knew in her bones that this was not the last time the Empire would hear of humanity. As she left the Emperor's chambers, she could already feel the storm brewing. An unknown storm that would change the galaxy forever. The catalyst years passed, and the Empire's grip on the galaxy only tightened. Zara, despite her growing doubts, continued to serve with distinction, but a part of her could never forget the warning she had given. Her mind often wandered back to the humans, a species still growing in the shadows, still evolving in ways the Empire couldn't comprehend. The turning point came unexpectedly. The Empire's scouts, tasked with exploring the outer edges of human space, discovered a small colony on a distant world, Epsilon 12. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, a primitive human settlement barely capable of defending itself. The Empire, hungry for resources and eager to expand its dominance, saw the colony as an easy conquest, a minor outpost that would be absorbed into the Empire's vast network, its resources exploited, and its people assimilated or eliminated. Zara, now stationed on the Empire's flagship, was assigned to oversee the operation. Her role was simple: lead the invasion, secure the colony, and prepare the population for assimilation. But as the invasion fleet approached Epsilon 12, Zara felt a familiar unease settle over her. Her training as a military strategist told her this should be a swift, uncomplicated operation. But the closer they got to the planet, the more her instincts screamed at her to reconsider. The humans were unpredictable. They always were. But this time there was something different. She couldn't shake the feeling that this would not go as planned. The Empire's fleet arrived in orbit above Epsilon 12. The planet was rich in resources, minerals, rare metals, and even an abundance of water. But when the invasion force deployed, it encountered something far more dangerous than Zara had anticipated. The humans didn't surrender. They didn't flee. Instead, they fought back. The battle was brutal, and for the first time in Zara's long career, she saw the raw strength of humanity on full display. First, it seemed like the Empire's forces would crush them easily. The human soldiers, ill-equipped and technologically inferior, were no match for the Empire's advanced weaponry. But there was something about the humans that Zara couldn't ignore. They didn't fight like other species. They fought with a kind of desperation and ingenuity that no one had expected. They used guerrilla tactics, exploiting the terrain and utilizing unconventional weapons that the Empire's superior forces weren't prepared for. Zara watched in disbelief as human-made explosives tore through the Imperial supply lines, as hastily constructed barricades held back armored tanks, and as small, nimble human craft darted between the Empire's massive warships, harassing them with precision strikes. The humans had no chance of winning in a direct confrontation, but they didn't care. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to survive. As the battle dragged on, it became clear that the Empire's commanders had vastly underestimated the humans. Their arrogance had led them to assume that the planet would fall without resistance. Now, they were on the back foot, scrambling to regain control. Zara watched from the bridge of the flagship, torn between her duty to the Empire and her growing admiration for the humans' resilience. She had warned them, but no one had listened. The humans weren't just a primitive species. They were a force to be reckoned with. And they had just proven it. The tide of the battle shifted when the humans launched a surprise assault on the Empire's command center, using tactics that were as unexpected as they were effective. Zara's forces were thrown into chaos, their formations disrupted, their communication systems hacked, and their supply chains severed. It was only a matter of time before the human resistance overwhelmed the Imperial garrison. The once proud Empire's forces were scattered, retreating in disarray as the humans pressed forward with relentless determination. For the first time in Zara's life, she felt the sting of failure. The Empire was losing to these primitive beings, and it wasn't because of their technology or weaponry. It was because of their spirit. That be why the end of the battle, the Empire's forces had been forced to retreat from Epsilon 12, leaving the human colony intact for now. The Empire's might had been humbled, and the humans had sent a message to the galaxy. They were no longer prey. Zara stood at the helm of her flagship, the hum of its engines the only sound in the cold silence of space. She stared out into the endless void, the weight of her warning pressing on her. She had seen the Empire's greatest strength reduced to rubble. And for the first time, she began to question everything she had believed in. The Emperor had been right about one thing. Humanity was different. They were not to be underestimated. And the Empire, in its arrogance, had made a fatal mistake. The war had begun, and humanity was no longer willing to bow to the Empire's will. In the months following the failed invasion of Epsilon 12, the Empire's leadership was forced to reassess their understanding of humanity. Zara had been right about one thing. The humans were not easily subdued. The Empire's arrogance had clouded their judgment, and now they faced a rising threat that no one had anticipated. The first battle had been a fluke, they told themselves. The humans had managed to repel the invasion, but the Empire would not be so easily defeated. The problem, however, was that the humans weren't just surviving. They were learning, adapting, and evolving at a pace that stunned even the Empire's most experienced generals. It wasn't just the humans' fighting spirit that made them dangerous. It was their creativity, their ability to innovate under pressure, and their relentless will to survive. Zara watched from the Imperial flagship as human forces began to coalesce into something more formidable than a collection of isolated colonies. They weren't just defending their homes anymore. They were organizing, coordinating, and launching strategic strikes across Imperial space. Every time the Empire struck at one of their outposts, the humans retaliated with precision, often using methods that had never been seen before. One such strike came when the humans, using primitive-looking spacecraft, launched an attack on one of the Empire's most secure supply hubs on the planet Helta 6. The attack was swift and brutal. The humans bypassed the Empire's heavy defenses by hacking into the orbital station systems, disabling key weapon systems and creating openings for their smaller craft to slip through undetected. Zara, watching the attack unfold from the Empire's command center, couldn't help but marvel at their ingenuity. These weren't the same weak, frightened creatures they had underestimated on Epsilon 12. These humans had grown into something far more dangerous. Soon, the humans were making their presence felt in all corners of the galaxy. Their resistance was not limited to a single world or a single rebellion. They had formed alliances with other species, those who had once been subjugated by the Empire. Zara had seen human diplomats and freedom fighters working alongside the alien races that had long been oppressed. They were teaching others how to fight back, how to use the Empire's own arrogance against it. Zara had initially believed that the Empire's superiority would win the day. That belief had shattered with each passing day. The Empire's fleet, once feared across the galaxy, was now struggling to maintain control. Human forces were harrying them, ambushing supply lines, sabotaging Imperial technology, and spreading disinformation. The humans, with their overwhelming sense of unity and resolve, were turning the tide of the war, and they weren't doing it with superior firepower. They were doing it with willpower. One day, a transmission from the Emperor himself cracked through the communications channels, his voice harsh and filled with rage. "General Zara, you have failed. You were given command of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and yet the humans have humiliated us. I will not tolerate further failure. Eliminate them." Asterisk now starred. Zara had heard the command before many times, but this time, something was different. The Emperor's voice lacked its usual confidence. There was an underlying fear in his words. The Empire was crumbling, and the Emperor knew it. This was no longer about a few rebellious colonies. It was about survival. Zara's eyes narrowed as she sat in the war room of the flagship. She knew what was coming, another large-scale assault on human territory. But this time, she wasn't sure the Empire would survive it. She had seen the humans' potential, and it was growing by the day. They weren't just resisting, they were evolving into something the Empire could no longer control. But Zara wasn't just a general. She was also a survivor. And for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand that survival might not mean victory for the Empire. It might mean something entirely different. As the weeks passed, the human forces continued to strengthen. They launched coordinated strikes on key Imperial bases, slowly choking off the Empire supply chains. They had learned to fight smarter, not harder, using the Empire's own technologies against them. Their once primitive ships now boasted advanced cloaking systems, hacking tools, and experimental weaponry, designed by human engineers who had never stopped fighting, never stopped learning. That Zara's doubts grew. The humans were relentless. They refused to give up, no matter the cost. It wasn't just their ingenuity that made them dangerous. It was their unshakable belief that they had a right to exist, to fight for their future. That belief was infectious, and Zara saw it spreading across the galaxy. The humans were no longer isolated. They had become the beacon of resistance, a symbol of hope for every oppressed race in the galaxy. And yet, the Empire refused to acknowledge their strength. Even now, the Emperor continued to send wave after wave of forces, each one failing in the face of humanity's overwhelming spirit. Zara stood in the command room of the flagship, watching as another battle unfolded. The humans had managed to infiltrate one of the Empire's most secure bases on Jorith Prime. The attack was swift and brutal, the Empire's defenses crumbling before the onslaught. Zara knew this would be the turning point. Humanity wasn't just a nuisance anymore. They weren't just a rebellion to be crushed. They were the future, and the Empire, in all its arrogance, had made the mistake of ignoring them. The final realization hit Zara like a cold wave. The Empire had underestimated humanity from the start, and now it was too late. The humans had already won, not with their weapons, not with their technology, but with something far more powerful: their will to fight. The Galactic Empire, once the most formidable force in the universe, was crumbling. Zara watched from the flagship's bridge as the last remnants of Imperial forces retreated in disarray. Humanity, against all odds, had brought down the Empire. It wasn't just their military might that had done it. It was their spirit, their unity, their refusal to bow to the tyrannical rule of a collapsing empire. The Empire's greatest asset, the sheer weight of its military, was no match for the resilience of the human will. Zara had seen it firsthand. She had watched as human forces struck at the heart of the Empire, infiltrating their most secure bases, disrupting supply chains, and launching devastating cyber attacks that crippled the Imperial war machine. It wasn't just the humans' ability to adapt that made them dangerous. It was their determination to fight for something bigger than themselves. Their families, their homes, and their future. IKT had all started with a single colony on Epsilon 12, but now the war had spread across the galaxy. Every corner of the Empire was under attack, and no matter how many Imperial fleets were sent to quell the rebellion, humanity simply would not be stopped. Zara's allegiance to the Empire had waned long ago. She had seen the truth. The Empire's days were numbered. It had grown complacent, arrogant, and had underestimated the very species it sought to crush. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future, a future that had been stolen from them by a galaxy-spanning empire. Now, the final battle was upon them. The humans had managed to breach the Empire's capital, a feat no one had believed possible. Imperial forces, now stretched thin and disorganized, scrambled to defend the heart of their empire. But it was too late. Zara knew the outcome. The Empire had already lost. She stood at the helm of the flagship, the cold, vast expanse of space stretching out before her. This was the moment she had waited for, the moment when the Empire would finally pay for its hubris. Human forces had infiltrated the Imperial capital, using their guerrilla tactics and advanced technology to break through the planetary defenses. Zara watched as human troops, with grim determination, fought their way through the streets of the once proud capital. The city that had once been a symbol of the Empire's dominance was now in ruins, its shining towers reduced to rubble. The final confrontation took place in the heart of the Imperial Palace. Zara had once stood in those halls, proud of the empire she had served. Now, she watched as human forces stormed the throne room, their weapons drawn, their eyes set on the ultimate prize, the Emperor himself. The Emperor, who had once dismissed humanity as a mere nuisance, now cowered before the same species he had so callously sought to destroy. Zara watched, emotionless, as the humans captured the Emperor and brought him to justice. His empire, his reign of terror, was over. The humans had won, but at a great cost. The galaxy was in ruins, and the price of victory had been steep. Zara felt the weight of it all. The lives lost, the worlds destroyed, and the countless sacrifices made by the very species she had once been trained to eradicate. But in the end, she knew that the humans' victory was inevitable. The Empire's cruelty had sparked the fires of rebellion, and now those fires had consumed everything in their path. As the Emperor was led away, Zara turned her gaze to the horizon, watching as the final remnants of the Empire's warships were destroyed by the combined might of the human resistance. The Empire was finished. The war was over, in the quiet aftermath of the battle. Zara walked among the ruins of the Imperial capital, her mind heavy with the knowledge that she had been part of something far greater than any empire. She had fought for a system that believed itself invincible, but in the end, it had been human resilience that had shattered that illusion. And now, Zara understood. The Empire had failed because it had underestimated the very thing that made humanity so powerful. Their ability to rise from the ashes, to rebuild, and to forge a future where they would never be silenced. Zara stood in the midst of the ruins, surrounded by the victorious human forces. She had seen the depths of their strength, their resolve, and their unyielding spirit. She had watched them fight, adapt, and overcome every obstacle placed in their way. The Empire had been blind to this strength, and that blindness had led to its downfall. Humanity had won the war, not just by defeating an empire, but by proving that no force in the galaxy could ever truly conquer them. Yes, she looked toward the horizon, the stars burning brightly overhead. Zara felt a strange peace settle over her. The war was over. The Empire was finished, and humanity, against all odds, had secured its place in the galaxy. Asterisk, asterisk, ending asterisk, asterisk, the Emperor's reign had ended. The once feared empire had fallen, its military shattered, and its capital reduced to rubble. Zara, the war veteran who had once believed in the Empire's invincibility, now stood as a witness to humanity's greatest triumph. The humans had not only survived, they had built a future for themselves, one that the Empire could never have foreseen. In the ashes of the old order, a new era was born, one where humanity would rise to become the true power in the galaxy. And Zara, now standing among the humans, knew that she had been part of something far greater than she could have ever imagined, the birth of a new hope.